Welcome to episode 31 on the Air Hug community. Hey, welcome to the Air Hug community. I am Judy Arizosa, your host, and I created the Air Hug community to bring you stories from guests and myself that ultimately help improve the lives of others and boomerang back to improve your life. So we cover all sorts of topics like relationships and personal development, how you see the world, and just behaviors that actually affect yourself and others. So strap in, sit down, welcome, and thank you so much for joining in. Okay, wow. Can I just tell you, this is my third time starting this. I have been so tongue-tied today. I don't know what that's all about. But anyways, I got to let you know, I have some notes today, and they didn't fit on one page. So you might hear some notes rumbling. It's just me turning the page on my cute little pink sketch pad. All right, now that we got that over with, let's get moving. All right, so anti-aging. You know, it's such an interesting topic on so many different levels. From the time we are little people, like little girls and little boys, little girls are praised, right, for being small and thin and beautiful and ageless, really. This is pretty much what we're taught, right? And little boys are praised for being strong and big and smart. And while this, I think, is definitely changed somewhat in at least my lifetime, it's all I can speak for, I will say still the majority viewpoint, maybe from what I can gather, is that girls are to grow up to be women who are beautiful, who don't take up a lot of space. It's okay to be smart now, but we're supposed to be eternally young. And I get it. At the beginning of all this, heading into adolescence and young adulthood, this is aimed at sustaining our species, right? The two different sexes need to be attracted to each other in order for the species to continue. But somewhere along the line, and I think a lot of this has to do with certain industries, there are trends that have developed. So certain trends that are, I guess what you would say, in vogue for at least the female species. So I'm thinking in my head of like the Twiggy era, where back in the 60s, where it was very desirable to be extremely thin. And I think that's when the expression came about that a woman could never be too rich or too thin. So, and I've talked about that a little bit before and growing up hearing that repeatedly in my lifetime. And then think about the opposite, the I'm going to call it the Kardashian generation, where women, are praised for having really big butts and small waists, if that is even possible. I mean, not every body type can actually achieve that. But the thing is, these are extremes and they do not equal health. And I think a lot gets lost in here because people don't realize what healthy really is. And this, a lot, is fed by the very expensive and lucrative beauty industry as well as the weight loss industry. And now it's also being fueled by the anti-aging industry. And so here's the thing, healthy is not something that is trendy. Healthy is healthy, and what looks healthy on one person may not look healthy on another person. I guess what I'm trying to say is you're healthy and someone else is healthy could look completely different. So we cannot go by looks alone. All right. There's a certain look that, like there's the waist-hip ratio, and you can Google that. Now, see, that's ahead in my notes. I didn't get there yet, but I want to bring it up because this is actually a good place to bring it up. So there is a healthy waist-to-hip ratio that is correlated with a healthier existence. And you can Google that if you're interested in that. But the truth is, we're not all meant to be lookalikes, and we're not meant to be healthy based on some trend set by a for-profit industry. All right. And this is a very good time to bring up one of my favorite quotes by Theodore Roosevelt, which is, "Comparison is the thief of joy." So I'm sure that many of you have probably heard that over and over and over again, especially because quotes are very popular right now on social media. And actually, that comparison can actually be an asset and not a thief of joy. But that is something that I would like to address in a different episode in the future. So we'll come back to that. But in this case, the comparison is where someone is comparing themselves to someone else. And really, that is something that does take your joy away. It takes away your happiness because it deprives you of the greatness that you already have. Now, we all have greatness. And of course, that sounds like very overused as well. But hear me out on this. Everyone is unique, and we're unique in each of our ways that makes us great. So my greatness is different from your greatness. You know, I happen to be on the shorter side and have very big feet. And I always thought that was kind of weird. But then I realized that's just part of my greatness. And I always joke that I'm steady in the wind because I have big feet for being a little person. But that's just, I kind of make a joke of it, but it actually has helped me turn it around and be positive about it. So, you know, I used to call myself the wicked stepsister because my feet were so big. But now I'm like, what the heck? God gave me big feet for a reason. I might as well capitalize on it, right? So anyways, and then we're going to get into that in a little bit because attitude is a big part about what we're talking about today. So anyways, comparison to others blinds us to our own unique greatness, all right? And it actually can make us very unhealthy if we get obsessive about wanting to look or like someone else, all right? And while this sounds very logical, a lot of us still really struggle with it, okay? The big thing here is our attitude on aging. So as women, again, we're not supposed to ever show our age, whereas men can show their age. Men are distinguished when they get gray hair. Women, maybe not so much. And I have to say, I have a lot of respect for women who are embracing their silver. I'm not quite there yet. I actually really like dyeing my hair blonde, and I'm just going to leave it at that. But I really enjoy having blonde and pink hair, and that's where I'm going to stay with it. But I do understand about accepting your age. So listen, we are taught that youth is perfect, but you know, it's not. If you think back, were you perfectly happy in your youth? You know, when we were young, we were awkward. We lacked experience. We lacked really good judgment, right? And the perception that youth is perfect and aging is not is really a very flawed way of thinking, even though it may be embraced by the popular majority. I don't know. I think it is. The truth is that every age is perfect because if you wake up, you're here. If you don't wake up, you're not that age, right? So whatever you are today, we can only live in the present, right? We can't live fantasizing about the future, and we can't live dwelling on the past. All we really have is right now. And if we're wasting our time thinking in a different time zone, we are wasting our time, all right? So that's not really what I was getting to. I got off on a tangent, but my point was, did you ever feel perfect at any age? No, you know, and it's kind of funny, like, you know, the younger you were, the more perfect you were, or maybe I used to know a runner who said the younger she was, the faster she ran, because she remembers herself, right, running faster. And at the time, she didn't think she was very good, but then she realized, you know, that was the best she was. But anyways, that's just it's a one way of looking at it, you know. But again, realize that perfection is a big problem here, because I think when we think back of being younger, we think, oh, those were the perfect days. And the fact of the matter is, nothing is perfect. Perfect is an illusion, of course, and we all know that. Again, this is another very popular topic, but I want to bring it up because being a perfectionist is perfect to what? Based on whose judgment? We are perfect because we are perfectly unique. So what's perfect for us is what we already are. We don't have to try and be perfect. We are who we are. So it's really interesting because there's a necessary shift here, because I think when women are young, let's take exercise, because this is what actually prompted me into this whole conversation. Because when people are young, a lot of fitness goals are based on body shape and not health. And a lot of people make the assumption that a certain body shape and health are the same. And the fact is, they're not, because once again, it depends a lot on what look people are going for. When I was a very lean professional bodybuilder, I was not at my healthiest. I will say that. When I was had a few more curves on me, I was much more healthy. And I was not healthy in my brain, nor in my physical being. So, and I think people have to be careful what they wish for, as far as healthy and body image. So the big thing here is it's our attitude. And I want to talk about anti-aging, because there's a really interesting research that's gone on the last few years, and it talks about our attitude with getting older. And not only that, our attitude in getting older and how it's correlated to our risk for dementia. Ooh, didn't know we were going there, right? So listen, you're not too young to hear this. I don't know how old you are in the audience today, but really any age is appropriate for this conversation, because it's how you're thinking now that's going to contribute to how your brain works later. All right. And there is research that talk about this. So first of all, the big thing is that being healthy and practicing healthy behaviors have not changed. One of the best things we can do, actually, there's 4 things that we can do to improve our behavior to optimize our health. And I think you know what they are, right? We have a healthy diet, optimizing veggies and protein. We exercise to stay strong, not to be a skinny mini or to have a giant-sized butt, but exercise for strength, balance, and mobility. All right, and we keep our brain challenged. Hello, crossword puzzles and Sudoku and reading, right? And then the 4th one would be getting adequate rest and sleep. So while exercise is great, you're not going to do it 7 days a week without ever taking a break, right? That's what I'm talking about. And the same with being a workaholic. You're not going to work all the time without giving your brain a break. Giving your brain a break. Still getting tongue-tied today, but that's okay. I'm going to keep going here. So those are the 4 very obvious ones, right? Very obvious behaviors for good health. But there's a 5th behavior emerging from the research, and it's equally as important as a healthy diet, as exercise, as challenging your brain, and as getting adequate rest, which are the first 4 that I just mentioned. This 5th one is our exposure to negative and positive age stereotypes. So what research has found is that having a negative age stereotype plays a significant role in the signs of developing dementia later on in our life. Whoa. Okay. Yeah. So how you view getting old affects how you actually do get old. Wow. Okay. There's something called the stereotype embodiment theory. And I'm not going to go into it. You can always Google it and look it up. But in a nutshell, I just want you to understand it and what it means. And I'm going to quote here that the aging process is partly affected by the cultural influences that lead to internalized attitudes on aging. So if you see old people as being basically useless, kind of like a horse put out to pasture, I hate that term, that's going to have a long-term impact on how you age. So there's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy here. If you believe that old people are useless and that when you get to a certain calendar age, that you can no longer be, young and fit and healthy and attractive, then it will come to be. So I actually say, put away that rocking chair and put away that attitude. So I've always had the vision that I aspire to be something like a 21st century Jack LaLanne. So quick reminder, if you don't remember who Jack LaLanne is, he was a 1960s television star. And I'm just cracking up because I can visualize my mother exercising to Jack LaLanne in the morning when I was a very little kid. So he had these little exercise shows, and I'm assuming they were live, but I don't really know. And Jack LaLanne actually lived a long life. I think he died when he was 93. But the thing is, he was fit and he lived healthy for most of his life. And then he, what I call, died fast. So that has always been my goal, is to live well for as long as I can. And when it's time to die, just die fast. I don't mean to run me over by a car at a certain age or anything, but live well, decline fast, and then go to the other side or whatever you believe it is. So now I want to take a point to say, I'm not trying to copy Jack LaLanne, other than the fact, because first of all, I'm a woman, he's a man. This is the 2020s. He was in the 1960s. But I love the attitude. It's the attitude of living healthy, and you're never too old to exercise. Yes, I understand we have to accept our limitations as they come. At some point, our joints, require different exercises. At some point, we have to work a lot more on balance and mobility. I get all that. But we never give up, and we can always focus on what we can do and what's the best thing for us at this stage of our life. So, personally, I'm using vegetables and sleep and great exercise as my allies, and no matter what the calendar says, I'm not ready. There I go, turning the page, to give up on this. And I hope that you're not either. Here's a really interesting finding, and this is what I'm talking about. The risk of dementia is positively associated with a belief in a negative age stereotype. So if you already, now I'm not saying that's the only contributing factor for dementia, but it is one of the contributing factors, all right? If you take on this belief that at a certain age, you basically, have to retire yourself to a rocking chair, you're going to fill out that prophecy. And part of it is because you're going to actually stop doing the things that keep you healthy and young. If you stop exercising, if you stop reading, if you stop, eating well, that kind of thing, those things are going to affect you. So the opposite is also true. If you have a positive age stereotype, it's going to give you a cognitive advantage. So this was there are many studies actually that talk about this, but there was one particular study in Germany done in 2018. If you're interested in knowing about that, you can look it up. But basically, our attitude towards our own aging is actually a personal evaluation of our aging, and it's a prediction, a very good prediction of our cognitive function later on in life. So I have no idea how they did this study, but I think it's really, really interesting. And I'd like to move on and share with you 4 factors that shape the perceptions of older adults. But first, put that on hold for a second, because I want to ask you to stop and think about this. When you hear the term midlife, what does that mean to you? Do you have negative or positive connotations about that? Because I have used this term a lot and used it in my social media Facebook group, and I got some pushback on it from some of the women who didn't want to be thought of as midlife. And statistically, some of them, I looked at them and I said, are you planning on living twice as long as this? And for some of them, maybe not even twice as long. I mean, if you look at statistics, at some point, based on statistics, we are in the middle of our life. And so I don't know how you define it, but I kind of define it for women, midlife, as that point in time where you start to hit perimenopause until the end of life, because we don't know when the end of life is. So I just consider it young life and midlife, and maybe at some point I'll consider being past midlife. I guess statistically, I'm probably already past midlife. But you know what? I don't really know that. So I like to call it a healthy midlife. Anyways, this is the thing where if you're allowing that to feel negative, you may be contributing to your own cognitive demise later on. So I'm just going to say one little attitude shift around the term midlife can actually go a long way to help you. And again, this is a comparison problem. You're comparing your age and appearance to where you were 10 or 20 years ago, and you don't want to accept the fact that we are in midlife. Number one, our bodies are different. If you're a woman, and if you're a man too, you don't have the hormones that you used to have. All right. Women have declining estrogen and progesterone, and the ratio between them is completely different than during childbearing years. Men have declining testosterone, and I got news for you. That's perfectly normal. There's a whole industry based around testosterone therapy for men. I don't want to get into that right now, but your testosterone is supposed to decline as you age. So that's all I'm going to say about that. We could certainly get into a big discussion about that. But, the thing is, why are we comparing ourselves to being so much younger? Because young is desirable, right? So many people want to be young, but the fact of the matter is, at some point, we're too old to have kids. You know what? And I believe God does that for a reason, because who wants to be a young mother, at age 60? Yeah, it isn't going to work so well. I know it's happened, obviously, but and that was just an example. But, think about it. There's a reason that, there's childbearing age, and then there's past childbearing age. Anyways, besides, who would want to give up the freedom that they earned after all those years? Anyways, I don't know. Somebody might, but that's besides the point. So all I would like to say is I think it's very healthy for us to abolish the negative connotations about thoughts about midlife. My thought is if you wake up and you're in midlife, it beats the alternative, right? Did you wake up today? Great, you have something to be happy about, all right? Now let's go back to those 4 factors that shape our perceptions of being old. So, and I did a little research and digging, and this is from a number of different sources. So, all right, number 1 is our health and the health industry. This is really interesting because the improvements in overall fitness and well-being of midlifers and midlife and beyond in the last 100 years or so are actually being overshadowed by this multi-billion-dollar anti-aging industry. And this industry, unfortunately, I get that it markets anti-aging products, and that's not a big deal. I don't care about that. But the problem is it promotes negative views of being an older adult. Okay, and by older, I mean, no longer childbearing age. And that's seen as a negative. And so it tells us the signs of aging are bad. We should feel guilty about it, and we should do something else about it. And, it goes right down from any number of things. And like I said, you can slap me on the hands if you want because I prefer to be blonde rather than gray. Fact of the matter is, I'm not really blonde or gray, but I'm kind of like somewhere in between. And I just prefer to be blonde even when my hair was brown. So, and pink, of course. It is what it is. So I'm not defending my choice. I'm just saying I accept getting old, but I like to do it as a blonde. But there are other things. But, and I applaud women who are going silver because there's this whole thing where silver is not great. And I've seen some beautifully attractive women with silver and snow white hair. So that was number 1. It's what the anti-aging industry is overshadowing and continues to send the message across that getting old is undesirable. So the second is intergenerational contact, the second of these 4 factors. And this is really interesting because it talks about increasing the interaction between the older and younger generations leads to a decrease in the stereotyping of what older people should be. And it's a wonderful thing. It actually improves the attitudes that each of the generations have about each other. And I just love that because there's so much that we can learn from each other. I really enjoy sitting and talking to older people. and listening to stories. That's one of my favorite things to do. And I really miss that actually about my parents. Sitting around the table and talking about stories about them and their parents and just things that they've learned. And it goes both way. Technology today, just think of what young people are actually teaching old people, because technology has exploded in the last 20 years alone, right? Okay, so the thing is, a decrease in intergenerational contact is actually negative, and there's less of it going on than there was in earlier times in history. So I find this very interesting because I actually enjoy it. And my spouse and I actually, I don't think we work at it, but we happen to just be friends with people in lots of different generations other than our own. So we have friends, 20 years younger than us. We have friends 20 years older than us. And we actually have been together with those friends both ends all at once. And I find it to be very pleasant. And so, keeping that intergenerational contact going actually helps to dispel the stereotype of being negative about being old. All right, number 3 is, just have to look at this. I have the word legislation written here. And I think I'm talking about age, stereotype, and discrimination. And I am. And actually, now I remember my notes. It talks about age discrimination in the workplace. And, I think the world has come a long way. And now I'm not going to get into this topic today, but about discrimination for other minorities has come a long way. No, it's not perfect. We do have a ways to go. But in a lot of ways, it's gotten much better than it has. But I do think the age discrimination thing is not so great. And I think, some people have actually lost jobs and been replaced by younger people. Number one, I think some industries are willing to go ahead and spend less money on people, and so hire people who are less experienced and younger. But that's a whole other discussion. But it's definitely worth thinking about, and it does play into a factor, because for older people, it can be somewhat disappointing, and it can actually, grate on our thoughts about ourselves. I don't know if I'm not really considered old. Again, I consider myself midlife. So, but, and I've never been passed over for a job because of being old, but it does happen, and it can do a number on your head. So, age stereotypes do impact older people's health, and are studies that actually have talked about this. And so this stereotype about being older in the workplace is very relevant, and it needs to be talked about. So, all right. Research does suggest that having a more flexible view on aging rather than a rigid view is actually very helpful. It has positive effects on cognition, well-being, and health. And listen, this is where it can come back to bite whoever has those opinions. So it doesn't matter how old you are. If you have these thoughts, negative stereotypes about aging or positive stereotypes about aging, if you have more positive thoughts about it and beliefs, it's really what you believe about getting old. Getting old doesn't have to suck. And if you don't think it will, then it probably won't. That's what the research is saying. And I have no idea how they did that research, but I think it's pretty interesting. So it is really important that we don't buy into the view of declining cognition and physical health they coincide with a certain age on the calendar. So, because they don't. And now we know that all sorts of things play into cognition, including lifestyle and the 4 factors I talked about before. Our diet, how we exercise, how we sleep, how we use our brain, all of those things. And of course, the 5th one, our attitude on aging. So it's pretty interesting, don't you think? I think it's interesting. The thing is, this is largely, did I get to all 4 of these? I skipped a page. I knew it, because 3 was that whole talk about the little almost age discrimination. But number 4 is our social climate. So age stereotypes persist. And unfortunately, that's not so good for us. There needs to be a decrease in demonizing older people as being not as whatever. And so not as useful, not as smart, not as, whatever. Because the thing is, the younger people who have those attitudes are actually hurting themselves. That's the point. They're actually hurting themselves. And so the big thing here is attitude matters. It really does. So making your brain understand that people are valuable at any age, and the value they deliver at whatever age they're at is not dependent on the calendar. You can't say whatever. Of course, the older you are, the more experience you have, and you can share that with other people. But it's just, people are valuable in every single stage of their life. And that's what we have to remember. And so, older adults are generally happier than younger adults. Did you know that? Believe it or not. And maybe it has something to do with retirement and not having to answer to other people and whatever. But I think it's very interesting because happiness is related to health. And so if we just take on that attitude that we can just be happy wherever we are, it's going to serve us well in the long run. So this is a long way from starting out. This whole conversation started out being based on exercising for health versus exercising for body size. But as the more I got into doing research, the more a little Pandora's box got opened here. And I thought once I went down this path, I couldn't erase it from my memory. And so I felt that it was very important to chat about. And I would love to know your thoughts on this. So feel free to reach out to me. And the places that you can connect with me are on Instagram at Judy Arizosa, Facebook Judy Arizosa, and then we have our wonderful Facebook community group, which is called the Air Hug Community. And then we also have our active living community. Feel free to make a request and join any of those. And you can also reach out to me by email, judy@judyarizosa.com. I'll put all this in the show notes. But hey, listen, I really want to thank you for listening today, because it's really important that we value human life at every age, from right on through, from all the ages and stages. There's always something valuable that someone has to offer if we would just open our attitude, open our minds, and listen, and remember that what goes around comes around. And so if we feel negative about getting older, it's probably gonna not work out so well for us. So anyways, thank you very much. If you enjoyed this episode, I would ask you please to leave a review. So here's the thing, Apple really thrives on reviews. And so I'm asking you out of the goodness of your heart to please give this podcast a 5-star review, a 5-star rating, and write a review. Apple really does a lot. It makes our podcast way more accessible to others so that we can get that out there. So as always, I'm super grateful for you tuning in today, and I hope that you have a wonderful week. I will be back next Tuesday with a new episode, and every single Tuesday. Thank you.